everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. How's everyone doing? Are we fully fascist now? Is that what's going on? The Supreme Court just ruled that it's okay to send innocent people to the Salvadoran slave camp. So, is that what's the line between like kind of fascist and totally fascist? Because we crossed that line, I guess. Also, this is fun. This is a fun way to spend my I was gonna say spend my morning. I took Mabel out, our dog, very early this morning. She was whimpering, and I didn't want to wake Naomi up, so I took her. Naomi does the morning walks, I do the night walks. That's how we divide it up with Mabel. So I just took Mabel to the backyard. We walk out, there's a raccoon just hanging out in our tree back there. So I just get Mabel to pee and we quick run back inside. I don't know how dangerous or not dangerous raccoons are. I just know it was like close enough where I'm just like, this is uncomfortable. I've only seen you from a distance. So anyway, then later on, I take Mabel out for another pee, and she goes to pee, and I look over, and like 10 feet away from her, there's a dead squirrel there. And it looks like it had its head caved in, or it was decapitated, or something like that. There was no blood, so it wasn't like it was as they say on the cop shows, blunt force trauma. I think it looked actually like it had its neck snapped. So I don't know if it got in a fight with the raccoon because they're fighting. There's an avocado tree, and I don't know if they were fighting over avocados. If the squirrel came upon, because what it looked like before was that the raccoon got into the squirrel's burrow, wherever it was hiding avocado seeds, and it looked like it was like raiding the squirrel's stores. I don't know if there was an altercation, if it was an accident, something happened. How often do squirrels fall out of trees? I thought for a second it was bird flu. I was like, is this H5N1? I don't believe so. I don't believe that bird flu snaps the neck of the victim or whatever happened. The squirrel did not look like his demise was viral in nature. I mean, I covered myself in as many N95s and plastic gloves, and I use cardboard to dispose of the corpse. This is not what I don't use this intro. This is like a couples therapy intro. This is not what I do in these intros. I feel insane from both living through the political times we're in and also having to dispose of a body that I didn't really want to. I don't know if anyone's like psyched to dispose of an animal body in their backyard. Anyway, today's episode, this was wonderful. Today I'm talking to Anders Nilsen. If you don't know who he is, I'm going to read you his bio right now. Growing up between Minneapolis and the mountains of northern New Hampshire, Anders Nilsen is the artist and author of 10 books, including Big Questions, The End, and Poetry is Useless. His work has been featured in the New York Times, Poetry Magazine, Kramer's Ergot, Pitchfork, The New Yorker, and elsewhere. His comics have been translated widely overseas, and his painting and drawing have been exhibited internationally. Anders' work has received 3 Ignatz Awards, as well as the Lind Ward Prize for the graphic novel, and Big Questions was listed as a New York Times notable book in 2011. His most recent work, Tongues Volume 1, was just published by Pantheon, and like everything else he does, it is wonderful. I have no idea where I first encountered Anders' work. There's a fantastic comic shop in Pittsburgh called Copacetic Comics. They're online, so you don't even have to live in Pittsburgh to check them out. But the owner of that turned me on to so many cool comics folks. I don't know if it was like maybe in a Kramer's Ergot, maybe through Big Questions, but I've always admired Anders' work a ton, so this was a joy to get to talk to him. This was recorded back, I think, January or February, I don't know. As I've said in previous episodes, the fires kind of threw off the schedule of the show. But we talk a lot about his dad, living in the woods of New Hampshire and politics and a ton of other stuff. It's great. Anders was very thoughtful and nice. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Coming up on the show, a lot of cool talks. If you're a comics person, Kelly Sue DeConnick, that was awesome. I've got a lot of musicians coming up. Tina Halliday from Sheer Mag, John Davis from Folk Implosion, David Longstreth of Dirty Projectors, Kristen Hirsch from Throwing Muses. Those were all very cool, so look forward to those. But for now, let's talk to Anders. But here's something interesting. Asterisk behind the word interesting, because I don't really know. That was the first adjective that I grasped for. Here's something, period. I find that Chicago has a character. I find that Philadelphia has a character. I am struggling, and I've been here in Los Angeles for 8 years now. I'm struggling to find a character to the city. It feels like it is a bunch of suburbs Frankenstein together. And I just mimed sewing for the audience. It really feels like that. And each little section has a thing. Like Philly felt like a very angry city to me. No matter where you were, it felt the anger permeated all of it. Chicago feels like, and this is mostly through the arts, and maybe you can tell me, but like it feels like a very experimental scene, or it feels like a scene where you're allowed to try things, whether it's music or comedy or art. It feels like there's space there for that. Los Angeles as a city, I don't know what it is. Do I have Chicago wrong?
I mean, I lived in Chicago for 13 years. I am glad I don't live there anymore.
Oh, okay.
I mean, there's things about Chicago I love. I have a lot of affection for people there and for aspects of the city. Yeah, I didn't love it as a city, and it's a very, like, there is, in the sort of arts and alternative culture world, there's great stuff, but it almost feels in Chicago like it's happening in spite of the city.
Go on.
In a weird way.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, you talked about organized crime. I don't know, like Chicago, you did, of course, that's part of the history of the city, but there was a real sense of, I lived there during the Daley administration, and it did really feel like this collection of people have been running this place for their benefit and not for anybody else's benefit for many, many decades. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, I feel like I also don't have a great sense of LA yet. I've been here for 5 years. And I feel like I'm a little disconnected from sort of the official politics of the city. I love the texture of this city and the eccentricity and sort of all the weird pockets you're talking about. It's like it just feels like there's stuff happening. You don't really know what it all is. Like, you probably don't have access to it, but like it feels a little bit here like nobody's in charge.
Yes.
Which I kind of like.
Yes, but underneath that, when you said, I know I brought up the mafia thing in the first place. Again, I would say 85% joke, 15% maybe. It's true.
Sure.
But it feels like, and maybe I'm just cynical, that there's that mafia feeling to everything these days. Even I do agree with you that it feels like no one's in charge here, in a bad way though. Like, it feels like no one's hand is on the wheel, and we're driving towards a canyon, and everyone's arguing over the specs of the car as opposed to whether or not they should grab it's a four-wheel drive. And then someone's like, well, no, it's only a four-wheel drive if you put it in this gear. And then no one's putting their hands on the wheel. I pulled that metaphor directly out of my butt, so I don't know if it makes sense. But do you know what I mean? But underneath it all, in the trunk, there's like a old school mafia guy sticking his hand, here's the metaphor, since we're in this car, sticking his hand, you know how like in the back seat of a car into the trunk, there's that little, there's the little like armrest that can come down and then you can go into the trunk, sticking his hand through that thing and then pulling money out of everyone's pockets. Good metaphor, Andy. I'm going to say it.
That works. I mean, Chicago really did feel like people, like the city had its hand in your pocket all the time.
Oh,
like
wow.
A couple of years before I left, they sold off the rights to all of the street parking.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
For like $1 billion because the city was in debt, but they basically like gave away all of that income to somebody who then could like jack up parking prices and jack up, ticket prices. Ticket prices it already felt like the city didn't want to make any, didn't want to raise property taxes. It just wanted to sort of fund itself on the backs of people who like needed, couldn't find a place to park or whatever. Like they were giving out boots, like candy bars.
Yeah.
It felt like if that city, it just felt like leaving home, you were fighting against like an angry giant every day. Whereas here, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure I would have a very different experience in a different neighborhood, or if I was, if I relied on the city a little bit more. Like I probably drive a lot less here actually than I did there. But yeah, cities are weird. It's interesting because I've lived in a bunch of different cities, and they really do all have very different characters. Like I think when I was younger, I sort of felt like people would talk about like driving in cities being super different or whatever, and it just felt like people were kind of making it up. But after a lifetime of living in a lot of different places, I feel like they really are very different.
Well, did you pick up on that when you were a kid? Was your antenna up? Like when you lived in Minneapolis, right? Did you have a feeling of the character? Like when I was growing up, I grew up in Reading, Pennsylvania. I don't know if I had a feeling. It felt more like it was just a white nothingness that I was in. I guess heavily on the whiteness, but like it really was. But I didn't mean it in terms of that character necessarily as much as a just kind of like it existed and I was there in it, as opposed to picking up on any kind of character. Were you someone who was hip to that? Bad phrasing.
I mean, I mostly would say no. I feel like I was picking up on the character, but I didn't have anything to compare it to. So it just sort of felt like, well, this is what a city's like. I grew up splitting my time between my mom, who lived in Minneapolis, and my dad, who lived in rural New Hampshire. So I definitely, like, the contrast I was super aware of was like city versus country, city versus like the middle of nowhere.
When you say rural, like how rural? Are we talking about a place in the woods that's miles from other people? Are we talking about there's a farm that's, an acre away? Like, what are we talking about?
There was one neighbor across the street, or, across the road, like 100 yards away. And then there weren't any other neighbors for probably a quarter mile. And to get to town was 6 miles over a mountain, and like it was all kind of woods. Our road was paved, but the impression, I remember my friend, like in high school, my friends coming to pick me up and like later saying something about how I lived on a dirt road, because that's how it felt. It wasn't actually a dirt road, but it felt that remote. I'm gonna let this cat out of the room here. About that, I thought I had banished everybody already.
No. The number of times I used to, we have this little like section out here now. That's like my wife's office on that side, and then our podcast area over here. But in our old place in East Hollywood, we were all in the same kind of area, and the number of times the cat would just walk across as I'm trying to do an interview.
Yeah.
And like try to knock shit over, and just like, I didn't care about you before, but now that you're obviously focused on something, I am going to annoy you until you either kick me out or give me the thing I want.
Yeah.
So
that cat pretty much always wants to be in front of whatever screen I'm looking at. He wants to be in between.
Yeah. So I empathize. Okay. Dirt road. Or not dirt road. This feels a little bit like my friends who lived out in the outskirts, I was in the suburbs of Reading. I mean, Reading's a pretty big town, 80,000 people, but like I was in the suburbs, which led into rural farmland. Like I could go from inner city to rural farmland within like, say, 20 minutes or so. It was pretty, it was that tight, or that stratified. I don't know how you want to phrase it, but you only had like one person where, I mean, the neighbor that was across, were they friendly?
He was decidedly unfriendly. His name was Virgil. He hated my dad for sort of mysterious reasons. He had a dog that would bark at us. He would occasionally need help, and then he would be sort of nice. He was like an old guy, you know, who drove this like barely functional old car. And yeah, he would kind of yell at us. There were a bunch of guys, like there were two elderly brothers that lived quite a ways down the road, whose like New Hampshire accents were so thick that as a kid I couldn't understand everything that they said. Like they would go for walks and sometimes come in and like talk to my dad, roll cigarettes and talk to my dad about the old days, about like trapping beavers and stuff. And like I found them slightly scary as a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, they were like from a different generation, different century, different universe.
Sure. When you say old days, you mean the 1780s, correct? When it comes
Basically.
to beaver trafficking?
Basically. Yeah. My dad, maybe we'll get into this, but my dad was an artist, and some of the last paintings he ever made as a sort of young adult person were of these guys, of the two brothers.
Oh, interesting. He was an artist, but I was reading a bunch of interviews with you last night to prepare for this. And was he always going to be an artist? Because I read, okay, your parents started out, at least from the one interview I read, it goes Peace Corps and then hippie commune and then New Hampshire. But what was going on before the Peace Corps? Do you know if he always wanted to be? And your mom's a writer and a librarian, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Was that always their path to where they were?
Yeah, I mean, he studied art in college, so they went to. He grew up in upstate New York, but ended up for some reason at a small like Norwegian liberal arts college in Minnesota, where he met my mom, and he did study art. My sense is that was a very peculiar thing to do. It's like now people go to art school and it's sort of normal, but I think in 1965 it probably was a little weird. And my mom, you know, growing up in the 50s was sort of interested in like beatniks and artsy stuff, like more sort of like classical music. But I think she was interested. Yeah, she was interested in literature. So it's not surprising that she would then become a bit of a writer and become a librarian wanting to work with books or whatever.
So mid-60s, they meet in college?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's the path for them to then join the Peace Corps? What is the Peace Corps? I don't really know that much about it. I know it existed.
I mean, it had just come into existence under Kennedy in the early 60s. The Vietnam War was heating up, so it was, among other things, a way to avoid the draft. My dad was explicitly anti-war, which was a little unusual in his world at that time. I think, like, a few years later, that was very normal. You know, in 67, 68, like, the protest movement had really gotten going. But when I think they graduated in 67, and he's remembered by some of his classmates as like standing out because he had a clear stance against the war. His parents were actually communists in New York. So he sort of probably came to school with political views that were unusual and probably more fully formed perhaps than a lot of kids.
Yeah. So he comes from pretty solid New York left-wing stock.
In a weird way, like, yes, but also his dad made a bunch of money selling canvas goods during World War II. Like, his dad was literally a capitalist, but politically was a communist. So yeah, funny contradictions.
Well, yeah. I mean, hey, you got to make a living. You live in this country. You got
Yes, and he did well for himself. They lived in sort of wealthy suburbs of New York.
Yeah. I mean, look, hey, I don't know much about communism. I am a socialist, and all we really want is for workers to own the means of production. I think that's the big ticket thing. You can still make some money.
I wonder what would have happened if his workers had all, I don't know that his workers were unionized. I wonder what he would have done if they all had decided they wanted to own the means of his production.
Well, see, that's the interesting
as far as
part,
I know, it didn't happen.
That's where the rubber meets the road. Are you going to actually, don't know where the metaphor is going. When the rubber meets the road, are you actually going to take your hand off the wheel and let the other people drive? Is that where we're going there?
Right. And then, so I never knew my grandfather. He died before I was born, but my grandmother, I remember coming to my sister's graduation in 1989, her high school graduation, which happened to coincide with Tiananmen demonstrations and massacre in China. And she was literally trying to defend the communist government in China, who had just massacred a bunch of its citizens, basically because they were communists. And so therefore she felt like they probably were justified
Yeah.
So yeah, strange, complicated, interesting politics.
It is, because there's that whole cadre of old school communists who, even after Stalin's murderousness was kind of revealed, they're still like, well, it's still better. I'm like, I would say whether it's capitalist murder or communist murder, it's still probably not good. I don't think any of this is like a positive thing. I don't know if I would defend. I don't know, if Noam Chomsky went out and started like murdering people tomorrow, I don't think I would defend him, even though he's written some great books.
Right.
I'd be like, yeah, he was a great writer, and then he went and he did a mass shooting at a mall.
Went off the rails. Yeah. But I think it was really a difficult. So those choices were really difficult at the time, and I mean, even for myself as a kid, because I sort of picked up on those lefty politics. Like, I knew the Soviet Union wasn't great, but I also was super kind of critical of the U.S. So it was like, well, because you want to like root for somebody,
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable if you don't have if there's two sides and you can't root for one of them. It's annoying.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about it, though, I've been thinking about this a lot. I don't know why I've been thinking about authoritarianism and fascism lately.
Gosh, why would we be thinking about that right now?
Something in the air. But I was thinking about how libertarians, especially the ones that are fascistically destroying our government at the moment, every time they get in charge, their beliefs are so antithetical towards governing that it all falls apart just based on through their own principles. Their own principles lead to the downfall of whatever they want because it doesn't actually work, right? However, I will say this for the USSR or other communist or socialist places, to destroy them, you actually have to go in and fuck them up from the outside. Like, the history of the 20th century for the United States is us going into left-wing countries or countries that have elected a left-wing government and then murdering their leaders or fucking them up or, giving them money for a coup or whatever like that. So I will say, being
shocked when religious fanatics come to power instead. We don't allow anything else to happen. And then,
Do you think they're actually shocked, or do you think they're just like, or do you think that's just like the public performance of it? They're like, oh my God, who knew that this crazy zealot would get in charge? We didn't know that. And then behind the scenes, they're like, yeah, of course zealot's going to get in charge.
I mean, yeah. I can't really get into their heads, but I think that they don't understand what the consequences of policy actually is going to be. And when it turns out to be, even more deeply anti-American or whatever, it's like, I think it's surprising for many of them.
Interesting.
Okay. I think Donald Rumsfeld was actually surprised when you know, the Iraqis didn't choose him and Bush as their new leaders.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, maybe.
Like he thought they literally did think they were going to be greeted as liberators, you know?
Wow. Oh, yeah. I always think that the hubris of the ruling elite is just a show, but maybe it really is real hubris. Like they're like, yeah, we're gonna do this. It's gonna be good. They really think that it's gonna be good. I'm just so cynical that I think that it's all a performance for them, and that they really know what's happening. But maybe they really are like, yeah, everyone's gonna love this. Everyone loves America.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of evil comes out of deep stupidity.
Okay, so
again, witness the current events.
So your dad grows up kind of steeped in communist thought, goes to college, studies art. Then do you know what the decision is to join the Peace Corps? Is it just like we have to give back? Is it all I don't want to go to Vietnam and there's nothing else there? Or is there an idea of service behind it too?
I think both. I mean, I think that sort of early mid-60s optimism was very real. Like, the Peace Corps being kind of like, yeah, we can go out and like help people. We can like help the world improve. And again, like whether it's a conscious ulterior motive, I think the politics of it also were like, and we will have Americans on the ground, as tools of our policy. But I think that impulse for people like my parents was very genuine. Like they liked the idea of going and being helpful, and also the fact that it would protect my dad from having to go to Vietnam for 2 years was, a massive plus.
Yeah.
And, it was also, part of that sort of optimistic moment was like, go see the world. It's like a sort of a somewhat new awareness of there's stuff out there that we don't know about. Let's go find out about it.
Yeah. Where did your parents end up?
In Ethiopia.
Okay.
Which also was on the verge of a revolution, which happened while they were there. And they actually they were there almost the full 2 years. And then there were uprisings, like their students became involved in anti-government protest. They decided to vocally support their students, and they were given 24 hours to get out of the country.
Okay, so they fled Ethiopia, come back here, and then what's the plan? Like, do they end up back in Minnesota? Like, where are they when they come back from Ethiopia?
They went to upstate New York for a year maybe, and did like teaching or substitute teaching, and then they had friends in the Bay Area who kind of were like, shit's getting crazy here. You should come, come check it out. So they moved to 8th Street and substitute taught in Hunters Point or whatever for a few years. And like my dad took classes at San Francisco Art Institute for a little bit. Their friends joined a commune. They ended up joining a commune. Commune decided to go homesteading. And that's when my mom decided she didn't want to be part of that anymore.
Yeah. I talked to someone on the show, Rose Melberg from the Softies a while ago, who grew up in a kind of hippie commune out in a cabin. She said it was okay, but it bordered on dangerous. It bordered on like a bunch of guys with beards and guns kind of thing. Like it was fine, could have tipped over into like from fine into Ruby Ridge, leftist Ruby Ridge type kind of stuff.
Right. I don't think there was ever much danger of that sort of thing with my dad. So basically like my mom on the way to go homestead, she decided she wasn't doing it. Mm-hmm. So they ended up in northern New Hampshire. And my dad, he still philosophically was interested. So his father had died. He'd inherited a little bit of money. He bought some land in New Hampshire and started building a house. And some of the remnants of the commune sort of glommed onto that for a little bit, but he was, he wasn't prepared to be a charismatic leader. He just wanted to kind of get away as far away from like normal American culture as he could.
Sure.
But so that's what he did. Like he built a house sort of using scavenged or what do you call it? Reclaimed materials and stones from the land and stuff like that.
He built it himself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean he would hire people to help a little bit here and there, but he designed the house, and it's very unusual and unique, and maybe he's very slightly lucky that it is still standing. It has a very unusual engineering technique or whatever. Like it doesn't stand up like a normal house.
When you say unusual, do you mean unsafe, or do you mean just that it was?
No, but I mean, I remember asking him about it a few years ago to kind of show me the structure of the house, and he himself was sort of like, yeah, it's settled a little bit, but it's actually still standing. Like he seemed slightly surprised. It's very interesting. Like I think it's a really cool house. It's an octagon. It would take some diagramming to show you what I'm talking about, but I think it's super interesting. Like he was just a guy who decided to figure it out. He sort of followed the Nearings. I don't know, some kind of like 60s philosophy, sort of back to the land writing that became semi-famous. But like he definitely was interested in new ideas of the time, of kind of like going back to the land and building stuff very simply.
When you're growing up, and I know there were like 2 grades where you actually lived with him, 4th grade and 8th grade, if I remember the interview correctly. And
you know your biography.
And then you would go there for summers and things like that, right? Are you like, oh, this is so cool, look what my dad built, he designed this? Or is it like, come on, can't he be normal? I just want to have like a normal childhood.
Yeah, it was a little bit the latter. I mean, like from my perspective now, I find it super interesting and genius. At the time, yeah, I was not excited to have my friends over. I think even at the time, I sort of appreciated it in a certain way, but it was basically a construction site for my whole childhood. I mean, for a couple decades at least, it was a construction site.
Oh, so it was always in process. It wasn't like you got there for the first summer after your parents got divorced and everything was set up. It was still, he was constructing it for, as you said, decades.
Yeah. I mean, you could make an argument that it's still not really done, but he's like, it's his life's work. So there's a way in which it probably shouldn't ever be done. And he involved my sister and I in working on it. So like he would salvage these, doors from an old hotel that got torn down and then put us to work, like scraping the paint off and whatever. Like it was very much a group project.
Was work his love language? Like my mother-in-law, when we go visit her, she puts us to work, and that's her love language. She wants us to like de-weed the lawn or something like that.
That's probably a good way to think about it. Yeah.
Did you appreciate this at all when you were a kid? Because I'm just kind of curious. You have this kind of very, I'll say strange, just from a like standard point of view. Like as an adult for you, and as someone who's just kind of talking to you about it, right? That didn't experience any of this at all. It seems kind of cool. It seems kind of cool to grow up in strange circumstances, to have an example of a long-term art project that's also practical in front of you. All these kind of lessons that you learn as an artist later on. It seems cool to have that, but like, did you push against it? Was it just something you endured, or did you push against it? Or did
As a kid, I endured it. I don't think I pushed against it. It just was what it was. You know, it was just my life. You know, if anything, if I pushed against anything, it was the fact that he didn't have a TV, and then that was a bummer all summer long to not have a TV. I don't think I really understood it as being that weird or different until I was older, you know, as an adult, even probably into my like 30s. Like I probably didn't really understand until I was, in my 30s, like how unusual my childhood was in that way.
Even though you didn't want, I mean, you knew on some level, there was some instinctual level because you're like, I don't want to have my friends over to this place.
Yes, that's true. But like the house, so like in high school, I had some friends there that I would hang out with in the summers, and like some of their houses were like that too, like kind of not like my dad's exactly, but like falling down a little bit, or they're just country houses that have like 3 cars in the garage and 2 of them are not really working. And so I think there was just a little bit of a sense of like, it was almost more aesthetic. It wasn't like this lifestyle is strange. It was just like, it just wasn't like my friends in Minneapolis or whatever.
Yeah. How old were you when your mom explained why they got divorced?
It was always, you know, I don't remember like a conversation where she sat us down or somebody sat us down and explained it. Like it was always sort of part of they were pretty open about it. I mean, I guess, you know, there were like details that I probably learned a little bit later, but yeah, it's like basically, you know, their marriage was a little bit complicated, and I think it was under a fair amount of pressure, like moving to a place where there were so few people. They had kind of like didn't have a built-in community, didn't have a lot of family around. Family is super important for my mom. Like her family's quite tight. And then other things were happening, like the idea that a woman might be able to have a career was also like, you know, not a super new idea, but it was it was getting mainstreamed in a way in the mid 70s that it just had never been before. And so I think, you know, that was a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Basically the kind of like headline reason for her to, you know, the marriage wasn't really working. But then the reason she moved halfway across the country was to go to grad school and like get a degree and sort of like center her own interests in her own life for a little bit.
Yeah.
Which like a ton of my friends, like their families were similar. Like most of my friends as a kid in Minneapolis, their parents were divorced.
Yeah.
Like 90% or 80% probably.
Yeah. You're a little older than me, and I call y'all the ice storm generation, because I don't mean necessarily like the going to key parties and shit like that, but I just mean like that generation where all the parents got divorced because, and I wonder if this, you know, at first I thought when you were talking, I'm like, oh, it seems like there's this deep philosophical difference between your parents, and maybe that's what was the kernel. But the more that you're talking, I'm wondering if there's this kind of, even if your dad was progressive in terms of his political beliefs, I wonder if there was still this kind of like old school misogyny there, and that was kind of a little bit of sandpaper in it. I don't know.
I definitely wouldn't say misogyny, but he was very interested in what he was very interested in. Like he was, you know, I'm his son. I'm a little bit similar. Like he wants to spend a lot of time on his projects, having other people impose demands. Some people are better with that, and some people are worse. And like me and my dad are probably, you know, have a little bit of trouble with it.
Yeah, no, I get it. Was it a kind of monomaniacal focus, or was it more of a wild-eyed? Does that make sense? Focus. I guess not even focus. More of just like this is the thing we're doing.
It was more like, this is the thing I'm doing.
Okay.
If you want, like, if I'm going to be a part of your life, like, then you're going to be doing it too. And if you're not interested, see you later. I don't want to get too deep into like psychoanalyzing my dad. But.
Sure. I'm just trying to figure out like how are projects, artistic or not, shown to you? Is it someone who is just like, this is what I want to do, and I have a logical focus, and I'm just going to figure out the planning? Or was it just like, I got an idea, and we're going to do this? Like the difference between, say, I'm trying to think of a director, David Lynch versus Spielberg. Like, it seems to me like David Lynch is more of a just like, this is the thing. And Spielberg is more of like I got an idea. I'm just going to focus on it. And that difference might not even be true, but I'm just trying to say like the way it feels.
You mean for him or for me or both?
For like, how did you witness it when you were like, were there plans? Were there blueprints and diagrams, or was it just this idea in his head and he brought you into this kind of like wild idea and you were part of it or you weren't?
It wasn't even it was an idea for him that happened to also be deeply, deeply part of just like who he is, which is to say, like, I want to go where there isn't anybody else and I want to do my thing. And I don't want to be bothered that much by the world. And I don't want to have to, like, he also, I would say, he might dispute this, but I would say is a bit of a pessimist about the state of the world. So I think there is a very real sense of like the world is going to collapse and fall apart, and I want to not be in the rubble. I want to be in the woods somewhere where I can like grow my own food and get water from the stream if I need to, and maybe, I don't know, like I'm maybe a little bit skeptical of the idea of big ideas from the outside. I feel like, talking about Freud and talking about philosophers, I feel like every philosopher's philosophy is actually just an expression of their own neuroses. You know what I mean? Like,
100%.
They make it a big idea, but it starts out as just like, this is the way I see the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's true of my dad. Like he sort of developed a philosophy and embraced a kind of philosophy that worked for the way that he just naturally was going to interact with the world.
Yeah.
And the fact that it was the mid 60s and the sort of the experimentalism of that time and the sort of weird, like optimism, pessimism of that time sort of fed into it and gave it the form that it ultimately took with his, octagonal house or whatever built from the bones of the land. Probably would have looked really different in 2024 or 1880 or something. Might have looked very similar in 1880, but yeah.
Was your mom along for the ride up? I mean, obviously up until she was just like, this is too far for me, but was she kind of roped into his, I don't want to say delusion, but I mean, just like into his idea? Or did she have her own beliefs and it's just that there was a limit to what she's like, no, I believe in the same things. There's just like, there's a hard line for me and this is past that line.
I think she was really sympathetic to his ideas and his sort of take on the world and interest in experimentalism and being sort of part of the alternative world. I mean, one other thing, he was very involved in some of the first food co-ops in the Bay Area.
Oh, wow.
And as a kid in New Hampshire, he was involved in organizing food co-ops. I think they were both really interested in that stuff, but the actual, like the sort of actual on the ground expression of it just didn't jive with her personality. Like she just needed more, she needed her family around. She needed more people, she grew up in not a city, but a very sort of like the county seat, like kind of a regional center in Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
So there was kind of a sense of like stuff happening. Like there was interesting, like her high school boyfriend, his father was putting on concerts in the 50s and 60s, bringing like folk musicians and blues musicians who literally were like not allowed to perform in Chicago or in certain places around the country. They were putting on shows in their barn of like Odetta and like Pete Seeger was coming.
Oh, wow.
And stuff. Like, I think she had a little bit more of, just kind of like wanting to be a little bit more involved in culture and in the world and a social scene.
Yeah.
And so, just like being out in the woods, she liked the idea, and she still has a ton of respect for my dad.
Yeah.
Like, I think she, there's a part of her that maybe wishes that she could have stuck it out and like made a life like that work. But it just kind of wasn't in her personality wise.
No, I totally get it. It's the same thing. You know, my wife and I think about it with stuff crumbling now. We're just like, what do we do? Do we move out? Do we find a house on one of the Great Lakes and live? It just is like, well, neither. Look, she's a stand-up and a actor, and I'm a writer. You know, we do podcasting. It's like we don't have any real practical skills. We don't have any. We don't know how to grow things. We don't know how to build things. You know, I can do some small repairs around the house. That's about it. And that's only if there's a YouTube video that can walk me through it. And then I can do it. But otherwise, yeah.
If there wasn't a YouTube video, I mean, my dad, it was the equivalent, you know, like he had a subscription to the Whole Earth catalog, and I'm sure he, you know, that's where he got a lot of pointers as to how to like make plumbing work.
Yeah. And now what? We have
barely good enough
TikTok videos of
totally
Christian homesteaders with what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, with a lot of money in the bank in order to do their homesteading.
Right.
Trust funds. That's the word I was looking for.
Trust funds, yeah.
I don't know if this is interesting from your point of view, but there is something to the fact. What was the schooling like when you were in Minneapolis?
We went to something called Open School, which was public school, but it was like my mom found the public school that was a little bit like experimental, a little bit like it wasn't actually Montessori, but it was of that ilk kind of. Mm-hmm. So like we didn't sit at desks, we sat at tables with groups, and it was very cooperative, and the grades were mixed, and we called our teachers by their first names, and if you were creative, you would kind of get extra points. It wasn't about regurgitating facts. It was great.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure I was remembering it correctly, but I was reading about that. I'm like, it seems like in Minneapolis, you have more structure, yet at school you have more freedom. Yet when you were in New Hampshire, there was less structure at home and more structure in the schooling, which was very, you know, standard, typical kind of just like memorization and regurgitation type shit.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a total mind fuck to go to school in a traditional way. I did not thrive.
Yeah, it sucks.
It terrible. Sucks. Yeah.
Yeah. The only reason I did well at all in that was because my parents put the fear of God in me, in that if I don't do well in school, then my future's fucked. Right. That was their whole line. And so that's the only reason. But otherwise, it was fucking terrible. It sucks. And you cling on to like the couple good teachers that value creative work.
Right.
And then you just like hope that you can get through with those, those teachers will like shelter you through. It really, it's fucking awful.
Yeah. I mean, I remember in my 4th grade teacher in New Hampshire literally was like maybe a little bit of a sadist. Really? Like I remember her being deliberately cruel. And then by 8th grade, like the kids are starting to get a little bit cruel, you know, like social 8th graders are like kind of little assholes often. I'm sure they were a little bit similar in Minneapolis, but I remember kind of, cause like showing up for 8th grade, some of those kids remembered me from 4th grade, but I was still kind of like cool, new, weird, interesting kid who, you know, from the city. So I was like popular and interesting at the beginning of the year, but by the middle of the year, it was clear that I didn't know how to play the games. And I was done. I left. I was like, I'm leaving. I'm going back to Minneapolis.
Oh, really? You left in the middle of the school year?
Yeah. I went for 1 semester and then took off.
Was it just, I just don't like the vibe? Did something happen where you're like, I hate this?
I mean, just kind of like, just the sort of mean social games. In general, I had a perfectly fine year. Like, you know, I had like a bunch of girlfriends and yeah, it was kind of fine. But like, there was this sense of like, all these people understand something I don't quite understand. And like, I could sort of sense like I'm getting put in my place. And if I stay here the whole year, like I'm going to be one of the unpopular kids. Like I'm going to be a pariah or something. And I had zero interest. Like I had good friends in Minneapolis. It was like I know how that stuff works. I mean, honestly, I think it shook me a little bit to where even in Minneapolis, I became a little bit nervous of like how do these social games work? The next year was high school, and I think like everything changed a little bit, and I sort of was like, well, I'm just going to be a skateboarder and a punk rocker. Like I don't want to have to navigate like being popular anymore.
Right. Right. So you were cognizant though. Or let me ask you like this. Were you cognizant of what the games were and then chose after, like, obviously at first you're like, oh, I'm not doing this right. Did you become cognizant of what the games were and then said, I don't want to play them? Or was it still just like, I don't get what's happening. I don't get how these cliques are forming.
Some of it was like, so one of the cool girls decided like I owed her a favor because she had helped me like ask out her friend early in the year, and like then later it was decided that I would have to date her other friend who I had no interest in, but it was like I might get like shunted to the outside if I didn't or whatever. Like it just was it was like the worst like Archie comics nonsense, you know what I mean?
But it's early lessons in power. Someone has power over you, and they're saying you have to do this thing, and it doesn't make any sense.
Exercising it,
yes.
Which, like, again, in Minneapolis, I'm sure there was that. Like, I just happened to be a little bit more on the inside of it, maybe. But also, I think there was less of it. Like, it was less punitive. It was less sort of zero sum. Everybody was kind of friendly. And my brand of like, okay, I can't remember what a dangling participle is, but like I can use all the vocabulary words in a fun story, and that was valued in Minneapolis. Like in New Hampshire, absolutely not.
What is a dangling participle? Is that like when you end it with a pronoun or something? It being a sentence?
Is it? I mean, I still
preposition.
Don't know. I have no idea.
Preposition. That's the word I was looking for. Not pronoun.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. Right. When you put a preposition on the end, which like I like putting prepositions on the end sometimes.
It's fun. It's great.
Sometimes that's where they need to go.
I like how my brain is working today, in which I can kind of outline Marxist theory, but I can't remember the word preposition.
I mean, one of these things actually is more interesting.
Okay, we're right at the end, and I'm asking a lot of these questions because I'm curious, how do your own existential desires form in this? And, the question I asked about if you were cognizant or not about this stuff is mostly about, like, were you keyed into things when you were younger? Or were you just... I was a kid who was just kind of, like, in this miasma of stuff, and I was reacting to the miasma as opposed to thinking about like, why is this happening? And like, what are the power structures and things I only started to think about as an adult. Are you reactive or are you thoughtful? I guess is the question.
At the time I was very reactive. Like I just knew like, ugh, I don't like this. I want to leave.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So then how does your wants and desires form in this? Are you always like, is art always the thing? Are comics always the thing? And you just followed it at, like, kind of like your dad? You're just like, I have this focus, I'm going to just follow it. Was there anything else that divided your focus?
Yeah, I mean, being an artist was always the thing since before I can remember. I loved drawing. Comics sort of occupied that world. Like very soon I became interested in Tintin, and then somebody showed me Marvel Comics and the X-Men, and like I never looked back.
Sure.
So I always saw myself in that way, whether I really knew what that meant or not. I probably didn't, but I was definitely pursuing it. So yeah, like probably very similar to my dad. Like, this is the path I'm on, I'm going to follow it.
Were there practical things that were laid out for you? Like, hey, if you want to do this, this is how you do it. I mean, this is what, late 80s or so, when you're like really deciding on this kind of stuff?
Yeah. I mean, I graduated from high school in 91. So like my mom was super supportive of it. I mean, everybody was, well, more or less. but my mom was signing me up for art classes from a pretty early age. And then in high school, there was a program where like you could take classes at, you know, if you had a certain grade point average, which I don't think I actually had. I was a pretty bad student. But for some reason, they let me take classes at the local art school with like the freshmen and the freshman orientation class. So like I exhibited, a definite interest, some level of skill, and I was very much encouraged by my mom. And then my dad was an artist, so I saw him kind of actually doing it up until I was, probably sort of junior high, early high school. And his wife also was an artist, and she would actually give us little lessons, me and my sister. I remember her explaining like negative space to me and stuff like that. Yeah, so I absorbed it, and I had very supportive parental figures for sure.
But is this like a train ride you're on, and you're just like, I'm on it till the end of the line? Is there a point where you kind of make a real decision, like, oh, this is what I want to do? Like, does that make sense? Like early on, you can have this want or this desire, and you just kind of like, I don't know, get on the water slide down to the end. And there's another thing where you're like, yeah, I want this, but or like I feel this in my bones, but you make a decision at some point where you're like, oh, this is really what I want to do. Did you ever have to, or some people?
I would say there's multiple decision points, and it's a little bit of both. So like, it was always the thing I was going to do, but I was also interested in other things in the world. So like, I went to college and I started taking art classes, but I was also taking, history and American studies classes and whatever. And so and I sort of thought like, well, I'll be a double major. But by the time I made that decision, I had taken so many art classes that I wouldn't have been able to take anymore. And I was like, well, that's ridiculous. Like, obviously, like, that's what I want to do. So it was like, every once in a while, the world sort of asks you, is this still your priority? And for me, the answer was always like, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, without any hesitation. And then, I mean, the question sort of makes me think of like, maybe sort of a major decision point then is like finishing school, and you've kind of been pampered. It's like I always had my parental figures who were encouraging me and signing me up for classes and telling me how nice they thought the little, drawing of Godzilla I did was or whatever. And then I went to art school, and like I had my teachers and the other students were all like, whether they wanted to or not, like it was their job to look at my work and tell me like yes or no, or like I had a built-in audience all the way through. And then all of a sudden you're done with school and it's like, oh, you don't have an audience anymore. Now you have to actually make this thing happen. It's not like nobody gives a shit anymore. You have to find an audience. Nobody's being paid to tell you whether you're a good artist or not. And having an incentive to like puff you up.
Yeah.
And that was a major, I mean, that's sort of what, in part, what Dogs in Water, my first book, is about, is like, I've been following this sort of childhood idea out, just like keep going. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's nothing, there's nobody here. Nobody cares. I'm totally in the middle of nowhere. And now what? And that's sort of what comics was for me, was like a way to create an audience. Like I didn't have to ask some gallery to show my work. I could literally just go make a photocopy of my sketchbooks and hand it to my friend, and they would laugh or they would whatever. And I could sort of make it happen on my own.
Was that really the thought then, where you're like, I don't want to do this within a structure, or I find it confining, or however you thought about it. I don't want these structures that have existed for other people. It's not for me. So I'm going to do this my own way. Or was it just, again, a kind of reactive thing where you're like, oh, people think this is funny, so I'll just keep doing this?
I mean, it's a little of both. I think I probably was going to find, like, I was going to settle into comics in some way, one way or another, because the storytelling aspect was important to me. I just love drawing, where you're actually drawing stuff, you're not just whatever, making a landscape. I don't know. So I feel like I'm losing track of the question. So after college, I went with a friend of mine, and I moved to San Francisco for a year. I mean, he moved on, but I stayed for a year, and I was like applying to shows at galleries and like nonprofit spaces and stuff. And it was crickets. Like nobody wanted to show my weird installation work. And meanwhile, I'm like most of what I'm actually doing is sitting at a desk, like drawing a little children's book for my little sister, and like making like super crude little comics in my sketchbooks. And there was a sense for me at that time, like I almost didn't fully acknowledge it, but there was a voice in my head saying like, this is what you're going to be doing. So again, like, I don't know if it was super conscious and like me coming up with a plan and a strategy. It was just like, this is the road you're on. It just becomes obvious after a while. Like you keep making these choices and you keep making these choices. And like, and even when stuff is rejected. So like I had a friend in San Francisco who was in a band, and they were putting out a record, and she asked me to do some artwork for the sleeve of the record on the inside or whatever. And clearly she actually wanted like the weird collage stuff I was doing, but instead I drew her a comic strip. And she was like, that's totally not what she wanted. She didn't use it. And I didn't care, It was just like, I had so much fun making this thing. Like, I'd use it for something else. I don't care, whatever. Fuck it. So like the world, like in some ways the world is like sort of trying to tell you no. And I'm just not taking no for an answer. Like, oh, yeah. Sorry, I am going to keep doing comics.
Yeah.
Whereas when the world is telling me no about making installation art, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess maybe I shouldn't do that. So yeah, it's very different.
Yeah, that's great. Anders, thank you so much for joining me. I could talk to you for another hour or two. I don't want to take up too much of your time though. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, bye,